1 week season.
What is going on, 1 week season fam, DFS fam? Welcome to the DFS Lab. We are going to be building a roster for the week 15 slate. I'm here with my man, Keegan. Keegan, how are you doing?
Man, I'm doing great. Really excited about this slate. Even more excited to build this lineup. I'm ready to get into it.
Yeah, I was more excited before Mike White was announced as out this morning.
I know.
Jets
awesome.
doctors. I was gonna go Garrett Wilson on all 150 rosters. So I was basically
Right.
gonna be playing like eight-man DFS this week. I was probably rolling with Mike White, Elijah Moore, and Garrett Wilson on my main build. So yeah, it's like the week has started over from a decision-making standpoint. Yeah, and our wonderful first practice build is now trash, but gives us some new things to look at. So we are going to pull up your screen and let you guide us through this. I'm interested to see where we're going to go. And actually, real quickly, before we dive into this podcast, I want to talk about this. What type of contest are we building this for? I think that's an important distinction to talk about that most people don't think about, because the way that we would build for like a smaller field contest is going to be different from the way we would build for a larger field contest. So for example, the power sweep, the 3-entry max $150 buy-in, there's 3 of them, 3 different sizes. And I usually focus on the 740 entry one, which is the smallest one. And the last 12 rosters I've built, I've had rosters that finished 2nd, 4th, and 10th out of 740 entries. And I think a large part of that is just the fact that I build for those smaller contests differently than the larger contests. So I say that to say we should probably make it clear like exactly what type of contest we're building for here. And then that way viewer, like obviously right now, a lot of our viewers are just 1 week season members who kind of understand a lot of these ins and outs. We're going to start bringing in more and more people who might be newer to DFS or kind of learning stuff through this show. And it's important to think about what type of contest you're actually building for. So Keegan, I guess what type of contest do you usually enter? Is it the slant? Is it something smaller? Is it the milli maker? What's your thought here?
So I enter in a lot of different variety of contests. So sometimes like I'll do like a bunch of just single entries, but like I do it to where it's almost as if they're all multi entries because I do separate lineups for each one of those. So one of those has to hit in my eyes. Like if in the one that's going to hit is going to be in like the top like 100, top 30 of like 10,000, 30,000 people. So
I like that thought a lot. So kind of like the $12 single entries, like that type of level where you get tons of entries, but most people are building it as a single entry roster, and we're kind of building it with a multi-entry mindset. So yeah, larger field stuff, which allows us to take on a little bit more risk, but still kind of be like not milli maker, where it's like, because also the payout structure is a big thing. The milli maker is like if you don't finish in literally first place, it's negative EV over time. You're losing money over time. Because so much of the money is in that first place spot. Whereas something like the slant or the $12 single entries, stuff like that, the $27 single entries, you can finish like top 20, top 100 and still have like a nice return. It doesn't have to be first place or nothing, which also changes the way we build. So with that, Keegan, where do you want to start this roster? How do we go through this build?
All right. So JM, I'm going to ask you, do we want the most expensive quarterback on the slate, or do we want to kind of drop down here and grab somebody who we know can still get us like 20 something points, but maybe not that 30 bomber that we're looking for?
So as always, I want to target 30 pointers first and foremost. It doesn't mean that it has to be at the quarterback position, but if I'm spending up, I want to make sure it's a guy who can get me 30. So I think Burrow can get us 30 this week, but if we want to go a different direction, I'm totally fine with that as well. I think any of these I'm not on Fields this week myself, but any of these top 5 guys can get us 30, but especially those top 4 outside of Fields. Have you been on Herbert at all this week?
I haven't actually. Have you? I've been on these receivers. Let me take that back. I've been more like on the receiving side, not the quarterback himself, though.
I want to dig into this a little bit more. This is going to be in the player grid this week, but the last 6 times that Herbert hit, 5 of those 6 times Mike Williams had a really nice game. 3 of those times Mike Williams like destroyed the score that Keenan Allen put up. And there's only been 1 time where like Keenan Allen separated from Mike Williams. So it's interesting, right? Because most people who play like Keenan Allen's going to be popular this week. Mike Williams is not. Most people who play Herbert are going to play him with Keenan Allen. But if Herbert hits, it's actually probably through Mike Williams, which is just like an interesting setup. So I've been looking at it as like, oh, the field's going to be on this, so I'll probably be off of it just because it's a broader range of outcomes than they think. But I think one of the interesting ways to play it is to say, well, if it does hit, it's actually the likeliest way for it to hit is not the way most people are playing it. So there is an edge there that I like, but it's not. I actually haven't built a single Herbert roster yet, but I will be messing around with some tonight. So yeah, I'm good. I'm good going any direction that you want to go here.
You know what? Let's do Jalen Hurts. I'm really like leaning towards the Jalen Hurts build today.
Okay, so I got a question then for you. You built some Hurts rosters this week. Have you been pairing him with anybody, or have you been going Hurts without? Okay,
so I have a couple where I do Hurts, AJ, and then Quez actually, which is really odd. But I mean, because you're paying so high up for this quarterback, and then also that stud receiver, you got to kind of find some salary somewhere. I mean, if you want to pair him with Quez, maybe Quez gets a touchdown or, something like that.
Yeah, I will say we don't have full information on this yet, but it does look like Goddard is on track to return this week. They've been a little cagey about that. Okay. But they don't have to do practice reports because he's still technically on IR, but they've opened up his practice window. It sounds like he's likely to come back, and Quez's kind of ascension has coincided with Goddard being out. Right, so there is a side where and plus like Hurts is the only running quarterback, well, Hurts and Fields, but especially Hurts, who really like gets enough of his value through his rushing touchdowns that he can actually hit without bringing somebody with him. So like last week he hit without AJ Brown or Devontae Smith being viable, right? So I'm always fine. Like he's the one high-priced rushing quarterback I'm fine playing without a stacking partner. But yeah, if we wanted to go with Goddard here, I think it's an interesting way to fill the tight end position. Or we can assume Goddard's out. Again, a lot of this is just the theory behind talking about how we build these rosters too. We could assume Goddard's out and go Quez and a stacking partner because most people won't overstack it, right? Most people won't go Hurts plus 2 pass catchers, which definitely differentiates us from the field.
Right. Maybe we could then just start out. Do you think Miles Sanders is a bad pick here or no?
So it's interesting. They're inversely correlated in terms of every point Hurts gets is not getting points for Sanders and vice versa, because Sanders averages, I think it's 1.8 catches per game on the year. He has half his games he's been under 1.5 catches. So half his games he had only 1 or 0 catches. But at the same time, there's these like Eagles smash on the ground games. I think Miles Sanders had a big game against Green Bay too, didn't he? Let's see. He had, So each of Miles Sanders' last 2 30-pointers have come with Jalen Hurts also smashing on the ground. And it's always like you're betting on 2 running backs from this offense, both having a huge game. What did Hurts do against? Can you pull up Hurts' game logs against, game logs and scroll down to the game against Jacksonville? Because that's the other game that Miles Sanders hit in.
He got 16 points. Oh man.
Okay, so there was one time where like it was like Miles Sanders was hitting and that meant Hurts wasn't, but there's 2 times where it was just like the Eagles ran the ball a ton, had a ton of success, both guys hit. What's cool about this build is literally nobody will do it because nobody plays Miles Sanders to begin with, and then people think like, oh well, if he's hitting, this guy's not hitting. So like if this hits, which again it's hit each of the last 2 super soft run game matchups that they've had, it's hit 2 of their last 3 games. If this hits, like you're just jumping over the field with every new point that you're getting from this combo. So I don't mind it, especially if we're saying we're going to try to beat 10,000 rosters, 12,000 rosters, something like that. It's one of these where like the fact that it's inversely correlated leaves most people off of it.
So like you just said, like 10,000, 12,000, but more specifically, what type of tournaments would you want to play this in? And then what type of tournaments would you not want to play this in?
That's a great question. I think I'd play it in anything, honestly, because it's probably the contest I wouldn't play it in are fewer than 1,000 entries, because fewer than 1,000 entries, I'm trying to say what is like the highest certainty paths to the highest upside possible. So in this one, it's like you need a lot more things to go right. Like you need the Eagles to score 30 plus and all those points to kind of come on the ground. But that's like we've seen it happen in 2 out of 3, and the Bears are like bottom 3 in most run defense metrics. So this is definitely a spot where it can happen. So I wouldn't even say I wouldn't do it in like sub 1K entry contests. I would just be less likely. But the larger the contest, the likelier I would be to do it. I would even do it in the Millie Maker, because if there's only 4, 5, 6 30-point scores this weekend, and 2 of them are here, and nobody in the Millie Maker will have this pairing, then it just sets you apart, right? Especially if we can say, hey, where else can we get 30 points on this roster?
I love it. All right, let's do it.
All right, we're in good shape with salary too here. Where do you want to go next on this roster?
I kind of want to go defense, honestly, just to get even a better.
I like it.
Salary,
Have you? So last time we talked was Tuesday, and we talked about the Broncos. We talked about the Patriots. Have there been any other defenses you've been kind of spotting throughout this week?
Man, the Broncos is really what I've been on.
Okay.
We could go Chiefs if we're really feeling it. But I mean, again, with the salary, I do kind of want to go cheaper here. What do you think?
Yeah, we can go cheaper. And then again, we can always pivot up if we end up with like 600, 700 left over, and we could say, well, where do we want to spend this? But yeah, Broncos is super sharp. Like, I think the thing with the Broncos is they're not going to hurt you, right? Like, they're going to get 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 points no matter what. And then they have the upside to put up like a 12, 16 pointer. So Broncos are going to be popular, but totally fine to go with here.
Patriots is also a great one.
Patriots also a great one. I think people just aren't going to be on them, right? Because people always look for the bad offense, whereas the Patriots are playing the Raiders. But like Colt McCoy doesn't make a ton of mistakes. It's not like he's out here as like a third stringer. He's like a 34-year-old backup, right? He's like lasted in the NFL this long. Like, he's a decent quarterback. But yeah, like I think that either way, like we can throw one in, right, and then kind of make that decision down the road. But but I don't see any defense this week where I'm like, oh, this defense can score 20 points, right? The Eagles can maybe score 20 points. The Saints are playing a rookie third-round quarterback in his first start, but they're not super aggressive, right? They blitz at one of the lowest rates in the league. And so it's not like they force a ton they play a lot of man coverage, which doesn't lead to a lot of interceptions. So it's hard for them to put up a huge score. So it's like, unless the Eagles just absolutely smash Justin Fields, who doesn't really have any weapons this week, like unless the Eagles just smash in that spot, I don't see a defense putting up 20 points. We already have Hurts and Miles Sanders on this roster, so we're not really betting on the Eagles defense putting up a ton of points. So yeah, I like going with one of these cheaper defenses here and saying, okay, like let's just try to get 5 to 10 points. If another defense scores 20, we accounted for it. We didn't think it would happen. I guess the Patriots could score 15 to 20 because they always can. But yeah, no, I like going cheaper defense this week.
Okay, awesome. And then, sometimes this sounds terrible when you're really trying to just win a tournament, but in my mindset, I feel like when it comes to defenses, sometimes you might want to go the safer route because sometimes you're like, oh, this is a risky pick, but it could get me 15 points, but it could also get me like -4. And it really comes back to bite you in the butt when your entire roster is going off, but your defense is got that snowflake above it,
Yeah. On the flip side, like there's so many times where you're like, man, I had a great weekend. And then you look and you realize your defense scored 17 points. And it's like, oh, if I take away this score, like I had an okay weekend.
Yeah.
I don't really like, what's the example of a defense, if you can think of one off the top of your heads, that could go for like 15, but also like -2,
The Jags.
Okay. That's a good one. Yeah. Like I'm fine, especially if a defense had a big game from like low opponent scoring and then like a defensive touchdown, right? Like the Jags don't get a ton of sacks. They don't force a ton of turnovers. And so they can have that random game where like the opponent scores 3 points and the Jags get a defensive touchdown. Right. But it's like, yeah, they might get smashed in another game. So, but yeah, I mean, I think like the Broncos, the great thing about Broncos Patriots is that they both can put up 5, 6, 7, 8, even if things go poorly. Mm-hmm. And they can put up like 15 if things go well. So I like both of those defenses, and they're inexpensive this week. So I think we're in good shape with either of those.
Right. And then I like to go to tight end here again, just to get more of a base of our salary so we can see what we can do with our wide receivers and our running back.
All right. What tight end are we throwing in here?
I'm liking Schultz, but I'm also, again, liking Dulcich here. What do you think?
Yeah, either way, Dulcich looks like he's going to be probably the most popular player on the slate. When we talked on Tuesday, we were saying maybe he'd be low owned after his dud. Dulcich, interestingly, on Schultz. CeeDee Lamb looks like he's going to be popular again, as always. Since Dak Prescott came back in week 7, CeeDee Lamb has outscored Schultz by 2.9 points per game, and he's 2.9K more in salary, which means people are spending a full 1,000 in salary per point just to get up to CeeDee Lamb. And then if Schultz is having a big game, he's taking away points from CeeDee Lamb. So I don't mind playing Dulcich this week. Honestly, we have like a super low owned start here. We've got Jalen Hurts, Miles Sanders, Patriots defense. Like the Miles Sanders will be low owned. The Hurts Sanders pairing will be low owned. Patriots defense will be low owned. So we don't have to worry too much about things here. Like we could play Dulcich if we really like him. I'm totally fine with that. But also just like from a macro standpoint, Schultz is an interesting roster piece this week. And from like, not necessarily low owned, but he's also leveraged off of CeeDee Lamb, right? Like if he's scoring points, he's taking away points from another popular player. So, but yeah, I think both of them are sharp plays. And on this roster, we can definitely go in either direction.
Cool. Let's go Dulcich.
All right. With that, we're going to have some nice salary left over still. What does that say? 5,700 per player. So we can kind of decide, do we want to go to our high priced piece next, or to like see what low priced pieces we like and where we might be able to save some salary?
I love it. I like to go a little bit lower in this part right here to see if I can really reach up for some high price pieces. Maybe
okay, I like it.
4,000 mid, like around that area.
So we don't know yet on Brandon Cooks if he's playing or not. Chris Moore is going to be popular if Brandon Cooks is out. But I feel like if Brandon Cooks plays, people won't actually play Brandon Cooks, right? So he's 4,900, is a little more expensive. Elijah Moore, I think that, with Corey Davis out, he's going to be on the field all the time. Lions have actually been really good against the run recently. People won't want to play Elijah Moore now that Zach Wilson's starting. And then the Patriots wideouts, right? No Ramondre Stevenson, no Devontae Parker, no Jacoby Myers. So it's usually like a 5 wide receiver rotation with Ramondre taking over 7 targets per game away from them. Now becomes just 3 wide receivers. Running back targets will be filtered more towards the wideouts. All 3 of those guys are cheap. That's Thornton and Bourne and Aguilar. So those are that's really my main list of guys, 4K and below is Elijah Moore and those Patriots wideouts.
Now, Elijah Moore, he has the other quarterback.
Zach Wilson, yeah.
Yeah, he's got Zach Wilson throwing for him. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say it like this. Last year, Elijah Moore put up like a 30-pointer with Zach Wilson at quarterback. And he put up a couple other solid games with Zach Wilson at quarterback. The Lions are like the stone worst matchup against wide receivers, right? Like it's a great spot for wideouts, or I should say the stone best matchup for wide receivers, stone worst defense against wide receivers. And maybe Zach Wilson comes back from this time off and like actually looks better, right? He looked good in his first few games of his career. Like he has the talent. Yeah. It's been a confidence issue. It seems like it's all mental right now. And that was something we saw with Josh Allen his rookie year, was he came back from the bye. Everyone thought he was a joke. Everyone thought that the Bills had wasted this pick. He came back not from the bye. He came back from like a 3 or 4 game stretch of injury and just like lit the NFL on fire through his last 5 games of that rookie season. So it's not impossible that Zach Wilson comes back and looks good. Even if he doesn't, Elijah Moore at 3,600 is really like he was priced at like 6K toward the end of last season. So from like a talent standpoint, he's a guy who could be priced at 6K or above. It's just a question of like, he seems to be rounding into form with this offense. He's going to be on the field a ton with Corey Davis out this week. So it's really just like worst case, right? He still probably gets you 7-8 points, but he could get you 20 plus. So yeah, I don't mind it. I think his ownership is going to be lower with Zach Wilson. The risk factor goes higher. But if we're talking about, if we can get him right and then get like Jamar Chase or Derrick Henry or whatever, like Elijah Moore doesn't have to be the guy who wins us the tournament. He just has to be the guy who's capable of it and like won't crush us if he disappoints. So I think that Aguilar will probably be like 20% owned. Elijah Moore might be like 5% owned at this point. So I don't mind going that direction, but also again, we've got a roster here where we could just say, hey, let's just take Nelson Aguilar and ride with the field on that and know that we can still beat everybody with the structure we're going to have.
I actually love that. Let's do Aguilar. And another thing, the way you put it, honestly, you just convinced me like maybe Garrett Wilson's a good pick.
Yeah, I mean, I still like Garrett Wilson. I think, right, he was only projected at like 20% ownership, which is crazy to me. Again, I was going to be 5x the field on that this week, so I was going to be 100%. If he was going to be at 20% with Mike White, what's he going to be with Zach Wilson? 10%, 12%?
Maybe lower.
Yeah. So I mean, I still really like this spot. This is a team like the Jets are on the cusp of the playoffs. The Lions are on the cusp of the playoffs. Both of these teams are going to be like trying to score points here. They're going to be aggressive here. So Garrett Wilson. And if we go Aguilar plus Garrett Wilson, then we've got kind of both those bases covered as well.
$6,000. All right.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's ridiculous. And now we've got 6,500. So interesting. I think next topic is running back, right? Because that's going to determine what we can do elsewhere on this roster. I'll say it like this. Most of the 5K running backs probably aren't getting 20 points. But like last week, my roster that finished third in the game changer had 2.5 points from James Cook, right? It wasn't like I thought that James Cook would get like 13 to 18 points. I didn't think that he'd help me win. He just opened up salary for me to pay up for the guys who could help me win. So we could go with like a Rashad White, a Zonovan. Well, we've already got Garrett Wilson. Probably don't want Zonovan Knight. We could go with a Rashad White. We could go with a Leonard Fournette. We could go with the Dante Foreman and hope that we get, 15 to 20 points and then pay up at wide receiver. Or we could go with like a Derrick Henry and then know that we're probably boxed out of paying up at wide receiver.
Okay. I think we could try and grab one of these lower guys. So you don't like Zonovan Knight at all. Can you explain that?
No, I do like him. I just don't know that I want to double up on Zonovan Knight and Garrett Wilson. Well, I don't know. Let's think about that.
So basically, like for those two to hit, we'd be saying that the Lions would be getting crushed by the Jets. And then like the second half of the game, they'd basically just be running the ball.
Yeah, not even necessarily, right? We could say like a 27 to 24 game. And let's say the Jets score 27 or even 24, right? 3 touchdowns. Let's say Garrett Wilson gets a touchdown. Zonovan Knight gets a touchdown. Let's say Zonovan Knight gets 3 catches for 25 yards. Let's say he gets 85 rushing yards. So that puts us at 14 points. Let's say he gets one of the touchdowns. That's 20. And then let's say Garrett Wilson goes for, Garrett Wilson went 6 for 115 against the Patriots with Zach Wilson starting. That's a tough defense. Garrett Wilson went, I think it was 7 for 92 against the Bills with Zach Wilson starting, right? So let's say that he goes 6 for 115 and a touchdown. Now that's 26.5 points. Yeah, that's 46 points between these two guys. We didn't paint a crazy picture with Zonovan Knight. We gave him, I think it was 85 rushing yards and 3 catches for 25 yards. We gave Garrett Wilson a good game. We gave each of them a touchdown. So yeah, they can hit together. And they can hit together without Zach Wilson hitting. They can hit together without, because that just could be just one passing touchdown for Zach Wilson. They can hit together without Zach Wilson hitting. They can hit together without the more expensive piece on the Lions needing to be played as bringbacks. So yeah, that's another unique, interesting pairing that actually does make sense, right? We just painted a picture that was like not a crazy 90th percentile outcome. That's like a 70th percentile outcome for these guys, where they get to 46 points between them. So yeah, I'll take that. That's over 4x their salary if we want to throw in Zonovan Knight.
Let's do it. And now
7,100. Oh, we're in awesome shape because we can go we might need to move around a little salary because we can go Jamar Chase and almost get up to Mike Williams, who can also score 30 points this week. Or we could go if we get below Mike Williams and Garrett Wilson, the wide receiver landscape totally changes. But I wonder if there's a way to go Jamar Chase and the way to do it, throw in Jamar Chase, throw in Mike Williams. I think we're going to be over 400 over in salary. What we'll be able to do here, Mike Williams is 6,300. So what we can do here is shift from Aguilar down to Kendrick Bourne, and we save 300. We're still betting on one of these cheap Patriots wideouts hitting. And then we can shift from the Patriots defense down to the Broncos. And we're going to be right at 50K salary cap.
We can't grab Bourne. You said
no. Throw him in because once we shift down to the Broncos defense, we're going to be right there.
That'll work.
And so one of the things that I like to do here is we liked Aguilar, right? We'd prefer Aguilar over Bourne, but he's not our central thesis on this roster. He's not what's helping us win the tournament. We started with the Patriots, right? But we don't want to move off Miles Sanders. When we get below Zonovan Knight, we get really thin. We're already starting with like the Hurts Miles Sanders pairing. We don't want to move off of Garrett. Like if we go below Garrett Wilson, Mike Williams, like I said, the landscape changes. If we go below Jamar Chase, the landscape changes. So yeah, I mean, another way we could have done it is go from Dulcich down to Okonkwo. But yeah, we've freed up, and like we said in the last show, you can always be like, okay, now what's another way we could build this? And the next way we could go back up to Aguilar, go down to Okonkwo, right? Like we can mix and match these lower tier pieces. But like Hurts can score 30, Sanders can score 30, Knight and Garrett Wilson can combine for over 40. That would be 100 points right there. Bourne can score 20. That's 120. Chase can score 35. That's 155. Dulcich can score 20. That's 175. Mike Williams can score 30. That's 205. And the Broncos defense can score 15. That's 220. Like this is very clearly a roster that can go for 220 points. Doesn't need a ton to go right. Like we're not taking crazy risks, right? Eagles smash on the ground against the Bears. Jets have score 3 touchdowns and 2 of them come through these 2 guys. Patriots cheap wideouts is a clear and obvious bet. Jamar Chase has a good game as the focal point of the offense. Dulcich has a good game against this tight end funnel. Mike Williams has a good game against this wide receiver funnel, and the Broncos defense has a good game against Colt McCoy. Like, those are all like pretty sane bets, and yet nobody's going to have this roster, right? And it can score 220 plus points. So yeah, I really like this build. Any final thoughts on this one?
Yeah, and I just think it's such a valuable mindset to have, to where you can be flexible and really change those pieces that like may not actually upset the whole lineup, you know?
Yeah. It's too frequent that as I said, I think maybe I told you this. I don't know if we talked about this on the last show, but like my main build last week started with Goff and Amon-Ra St. Brown and DJ Shark, but I was going to be stuck on Dante Foreman as my number 1 running back. And in order to get from Dante Foreman up to Miles Sanders, I had to move from DJ Shark down to David Njoku. And it was like the whole roster started with this Lions block. And yet it was like, well, Njoku can match whatever Shark does. But if Miles Sanders goes off, Dante Foreman can't match what he does, right? So it's like you find the pieces that you move off of, and it shouldn't be the core pieces. Like I didn't move off Jamar Chase on that roster. I didn't move off Justin Jefferson on that roster. I moved off DJ Shark, right? And I moved off DJ Shark like a pretty similar score. We would prefer Aguilar, but we flip a coin. Kendrick Bourne could end up outscoring him. So yeah, we end up with a really sharp roster here. So yeah, man, I like this one. Friday build. We're getting closer to the weekend and what things might really look like. So with that, thanks as always for hanging out. We will see you. Hopefully you guys keep tuning into this. We will see you on Saturday of week 15. We will see you Tuesday through Saturday of week 16. And as always, we will see you at the top of the leaderboards this weekend.